Okay, we now have some breaking news, and this is very significant. For those looking at what's the next huge step, you're wondering about Jack Smith. Well, Jack Smith with a big development. The special counsel is in active talks with the Justice Department about how to end his federal prosecutions of President Trump. Now, this is according to a justice official familiar with the discussions. Discussions expected to last several days. But the person breaking this news, of course, is our excellent chief legal affairs correspondent, Paula Reed. Also with me, our senior legal analyst, Ellie Honig. But Paula, look, this has been the huge question hanging all of this over the whole election and now in the aftermath. What are you learning?
So we knew there were a few options. If former president, who now is, of course, the president-elect, returned to the White House, there were a few ways that his federal cases could be resolved. One is he said that he would try to fire Jack Smith. Unclear if he could do that because Smith is not a presidential appointee, but it was expected that his Justice Department would drop these cases. It was clear once he was reelected, he was never going to face trial. But we knew there was another option, and that is that potentially the Biden Justice Department could try to resolve or wind down these cases before Trump takes office. And a lot of this stems from an Office of Legal Counsel, that is a department within the Justice Department that gives advice to lawyers who work there. This memo that talks about prosecutions of a sitting president, and they are looking very closely at that memo to try to determine how does that apply in this case, where you have two pending cases against a president-elect. Can they continue to move forward? Can they take additional steps? Right now, I'm told they're in discussions. Jack Smith talking with top leaders at the Justice Department about exactly what this looks like. I'm told that Jack Smith is someone who understands that he has to follow whatever the rules and regulations of the Justice Department are. So at this point, they are looking for ways to wind this down. I'm told it's unclear when this will happen and what it'll look like.
I mean, Paula, can I just ask you in terms of your reporting, given how the polls showed this would go, given that the Trump campaign didn't think this would go this way, given that the Harris campaign didn't think this would go this way, I mean, did Jack Smith have this all sort of as a possibility really prepared? Or is he also, just as human being Jack Smith, reacting to this in the moment and trying to figure it out?
So in speaking with my sources, they were not aware of any discussions that had happened prior to today and said this was really the first time there had been formal discussions. But everyone who's been looking at the polls knew that this was a possibility, right? I mean, Trump has been asked what would he do regarding Jack Smith if he was reelected. But I'm told that the formal discussions, according to my source, have begun in earnest today. And it's going to take them several days to figure out exactly what this looks like and what they'll do. I'm also told not to expect likely any court hearings, that these would likely be filings, if anything, that would try to resolve these cases.
So, Ellie, look, we've been talking about this for years now, okay? We've been talking about this for years. Trump's appeared in courtrooms. We've all gone and sat in courtrooms where Trump has appeared in downtown New York. He's actually scheduled to appear in a New York courtroom in just under 3 weeks to receive a sentence for his conviction on 34 counts of falsifying business records. So, what happens to all of those cases? Is that even happening as a sentencing, or is that just gone?
Well, Erin, I do think the state sentencing, now we're getting away from the DOJ federal cases that Paula was talking about, but I do think that state sentencing will proceed on November 26th. The reason is the judge in that case, Juan Merchan, originally had scheduled the sentencing for September, which would have been before the election. And then in a somewhat surprising ruling, he said, actually, I don't want to do anything that might impact the election. Therefore, I'm going to put it off until after the election. So now impacting the election is no longer a concern. But this will be a surreal moment. We are going to have the president-elect, not just a former president, but now the president-elect going into a county-level court to receive his sentence. But I do want to stress this. No matter what the sentence is that Judge Merchan pronounces, if this goes ahead in a few weeks, it's almost entirely symbolic and formalistic. There is no way that the president-elect will be locked up. Even in an ordinary circumstance, he would probably be allowed to appeal before he has to serve a sentence. So it'll be an important moment, an interesting moment. But anyone who's thinking Donald Trump is going to be locked up needs to just let go of that fantasy.
Classified documents, misuse, hanging out in the bathroom, who knows what they were. At Mar-a-Lago, black and white case, you had the January 6th case, which there had been years of adjudication and back and forth, now into what was an official act and what wasn't.
Yeah.
Day in and day out. And now what happens?
So, first of all, this is an astonishing result if you just sit back and think about it. I mean, these are two of the biggest prosecutions the Justice Department has ever brought. Neither of them will see the light of day. Neither of them will get to trial. Neither of them will get to a verdict. Here's what Jack Smith, I believe, would be discussing as between what can happen between now and January 20th. He's not going to be able to have a trial, but a big question is, will he issue a special counsel report like we saw with the Mueller report, the Durham report, the Robert Hur report? The special counsel regulations say he is supposed to file a written report when he's at the end of his case. Now, ordinarily, you'd wait till after your trials. That's not going to happen. But I want to see, are we going to see a Jack Smith report between now and January 20th? One other point I want to make about this new reporting that we got from Paula Reed, that Donald Trump is going to fire Jack Smith, and he accepts that. Note the contrast, because 4 years ago when the Biden administration took over, and I know Kate will remember this, they inherited a special counsel that I'm sure you were not fans of, a guy named John Durham.
John Durham into Hunter Biden.
Into the origins of the Russia investigation, and he was a Trump. And what did the Biden administration do? Nothing. Hands off. They let him finish his job. He took into 2023. Complete hands off, and Donald Trump said, I'm firing Jack Smith in 2 minutes, to quote him. I should say there's a little bit of a difference, because DOJ policy says DOJ cannot prosecute the sitting president, which Trump will be in
All
a
right,
few
now
months.
let's just say, and we don't know, but there is a report. Okay, if there's a report, I'm just thinking back, because you mentioned Ben-Hur. The Ben-Hur report was maybe no one remembers anything was in it, except for one thing. They remember that he said that Biden was not able to remember things, and that Biden might get off because people would see him as an old man who didn't have a memory. And that was what stuck with the public. That became part of an important narrative that led into the debate and the whole thing. So I'm just saying a report can have influence.
It can, and I think that, the Hur report fed into a pre-existing narrative that was already starting to pull Biden under. So, I think we have to recognize that it wasn't the Hur report alone that, kind of generated this. And I think depending on when we saw a report from Jack Smith, we will see where Trump is politically. But yes, absolutely, these reports can certainly have political impact. I think, Ellie and I were talking about this earlier this morning. The thing that concerns me here is, we talk a lot about legal precedent, but the political precedent that's being set here by the firing, the dismissal of this special prosecutor, we're essentially saying, elected officials are above the law. The candidate, the president-elect, is above the law. And the message that sends, the kind of political precedent that creates, I think is a really dangerous thing.
Yes. I'm sorry I'm laughing. I'm laughing because the trailer for Ben-Hur is running on my phone. I meant
Robert.
I
knew you meant Robert. I was like,
And it was Charlton Heston or something.
Sometimes you can just do with the chariots are right. Okay. All right, let's talk about Mar-a-Lago, because Brad, Mar-a-Lago goes away in this case. Mar-a-Lago was the one that was considered by whatever the political persuasion, whatever people, that was a black and white case. That one ostensibly is going away too. And that's, of course, linked to Eileen Cannon, the judge who has been put forth as possibly an attorney general nominee for Trump.
I would argue they've been adjudicated. 70% of Americans thought these cases were politically motivated.
With the jury of public opinion.
And the jury is the largest jury that's ever sat in the United States, and it happened yesterday in the ballot box. The public, and plenty of people have misgivings about Donald Trump who voted for him yesterday. I think that's another thing we have to acknowledge. And in spite of that, they felt like Kamala Harris represented a greater threat. And so I think Jack Smith should take his cases and go away. That's what the public told him to do yesterday.
It's baked. It was baked.
It was baked.
I think for Democrats and people who supported Kamala Harris, they were disappointed that it didn't have more of an impact, because they felt like it should, that trying to overthrow an election should be disqualifying. But to Brad's point, it wasn't. And I think there will be frustration that it took so long for some of these cases. It took 4 years, and we haven't even gone to trial on some of them.
Had they gone faster and started sooner,
that's right.
we might
there
not
was
be
still
in this
a lot of.
To Ashley's
just
point,
one more point.
Yeah.
There were still there were like delays, but I also think we had the January 6 hearings. People knew, they watched January 6.
Right.
Whether we like it or not, we talked about this in the break, the decision to prioritize democracy as the theme of why Donald Trump should not be elected was not the thing that voters decided on.
No.
But
This will be one of the great unanswered questions, I think, of this administration, which is what took so long. I wrote an article in the middle of 2022, before Jack Smith was ever named special counsel, and I said, it's already too late.
Too late.
Merrick Garland doesn't even realize it. He's already lost the game. And with respect to Donald Trump's defense has been delay, 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 but I don't begrudge him that, because He made a defense immunity, which any half-competent defense lawyer would make. Ask any defense lawyer on the planet. Of course you make that argument.
Yep.
He went to the Supreme Court, and like it or not, and there's plenty of criticisms, he won. That's what you're supposed to do as a defendant. So sure, he was trying to drag it out. It was a risky strategy. It paid off. But man,
But
oh
when you
man,
wait 2 years,
right, I was going to say DOJ
it works
left
in
it
your
with no
favor.
runway.
Yeah.
So it's on DOJ.